Miami just lost their second coordinator of the offseason, and Mario Cristobal's dream staff is all of a sudden without its two most important pieces just a few weeks before spring practice. This is great news for Miami's rivals, especially FSU, and we'll talk to you guys about that in just a second. First, let's recap. Mario Cristobal took an extremely long time to hire his staff last offseason. There were reports that Miami's hiring was a complete mess, from guys like Brett McMurphy and the national media. They offered several guys that turned the position down. They were in talks with Ken Dorsey and Kendall Broyles, and it just seemed like an absolute dumpster fire down there in Miami. Then they finally landed a couple of guys, and guys that seemed like two good hires. Former Broyles winner Josh Gattis and defensive coordinator Kevin Steele. What did Miami get from these two coordinators? Well, not much. Some of the worst offensive and defensive play that we saw in the Power 5 last season. We're showing you some highlights because we like to laugh at the Canes, but they got absolutely torched on defense by Middle Tennessee State, Duke, Pittsburgh, Florida State. Just about everybody they played with a pulse ran the score up on them. They couldn't stop anyone on defense either. It wasn't just an offensive problem. Their defense was atrocious as well. And they got taken to the woodshed by those same teams. Florida State, Duke, Pittsburgh, Virginia held them down, and they only scored 14 points in that game. With the 12th most talented team in the country, these coordinators did not work out for Mario Cristobal. And there's a big reason for that. Number one, buy-in, culture, all of those things. Number two, it takes time to implement a system and get guys that fit that system that you're implementing. Speaking of that Duke game that we just talked about, I had forgotten this in researching for the video, but they were up 21-17 in the second half against Duke. They then got outscored 28-0, so there's a little fun fact for your Monday morning. Miami was embarrassed time after time after time on the field this year. Their offensive strategy and their defensive play calling just seemed out of whack. And again, there's probably a little bit of a mix of Miami's players and culture not buying in and it taking time to implement a system. We'll get to that later, and I think that's very, very important. But even with how bad those coordinators were, this is still a great thing for FSU, who absolutely dog-walked the Canes last year. Right before we talk about that and how good of a thing it is for FSU that both these coordinators are now gone, I want to give some love to our friends over at Gramco. You can go to thegramco.com right now, and you need to get this order in today, because today, maybe tomorrow, is probably your last day that you can order their Super Bowl box and guarantee its delivery by the big game. They've got a Super Bowl box for you guys right now with just about every product they offer, multiples of several of them, and it's about $250 worth of product that you can get for just about $130 by using our code TJ25 at checkout. I know that's a big purchase. I know that's a lot of money, but if you're throwing a party for the Super Bowl and Delta 8's going to be involved, you should get it all at one place. TJ25 will save you 25%. If you want a little bit smaller option, they have a perfect fit for you. They've got 4-count gummies that you can get for $6 right now if you use TJ25 at checkout. If you're not wanting to invest a bunch of money or try before you buy, thegramco.com. Go get you a 4-pack of the gummies. See what you've been missing out on. Appreciate them for their support. Now back to the guy who probably wishes he had a few extra Gramco gummies, Mario Cristobal. Remember about a year ago when Mario was jumping up and down like an idiot at the FSU Hoops game? Look at him 9-10 months later after the FSU beatdown and the humiliating loss that he saw down in South Florida at the hands of the Noles. We know how good of a recruiter he is and how good he did this year with John Ruiz's money, but now he's entering year 2, and this is a very important year for Cristobal. He is now a month away from spring football, and his lackluster offense and horrible defense will have to be under the direction of completely new leaders. Will those guys get their systems installed and up to speed for even this season? Time will tell. But here's what you see time and time again with new coordinators. It takes time. It just does. You can be the best coordinator in the world, and it takes time for not only you to get your system implemented, but also for you to get the right type of players that fit your system. The best coordinators and the best coaches out there are able to bend what they do so that they can at least be effective until both of those things, time and players, get to where their liking is, right? Mike Norvell did a good job of that at Florida State. The talent when he got here and the time that it was going to take to get to what Mike Norvell wanted to do didn't line up. But he did a good job of bending that to make it workable. And the best coordinators do that. And I'm not saying that whoever Mario hires won't be able to do that. But will they get that thing running at the speed they need to be a successful college program year in and year out? I don't know. College football programs are not patient with coaches. They are not patient with hires. And Mario underwhelmed in year one. Again, with the 12th most talented roster in the country, according to 247, they finished at 5-7. Their outlook on this year isn't much better. We're not going to do a complete Miami schedule breakdown today, but they're probably looking at 6 or 7, maybe a ceiling of 8 wins, but they've got a tough schedule in which they have to play Florida State on the road. They have to play Clemson, amongst other teams. A&M comes to town. And so I think that Mario's up against the clock, and restarting in year 2 is not the ideal situation. Now, Mario probably couldn't have kept either one of these changes from happening. Gattis was absolutely terrible this year, and when Nick Saban comes calling for Kevin Steele, nobody's turning down Alabama for Miami. But we'll see what hires he makes. Again, up against the clock, there's a chance that he makes 2 really good hires, and you're absolutely confident that Miami will certainly celebrate these hires like their national championships. Obviously, it's been 2 decades since they saw one of those, and so they celebrate anything and everything that they can that gives them some kind of semblance of hope. Let's say that Miami makes good hires. Let's say he gets both of these coordinator positions figured out. There's not a great chance that they're getting to optimal level in 2023. And so what does that say for their recruiting efforts? And what does that say for the path that Mario is trying to lead them down? Well, it means a lot of things, but first of all, it means that Florida State's probably going to beat them for a 3rd time in a row. It means they'll likely lose to most of the teams on their schedule that have a pulse, just like they did last year. It likely means they'll have 5 wins heading into the final couple of weeks of the season, and they'll need to beat Louisville, and they'll need to win on the road at BC to make a bowl. Meanwhile, what's their biggest rival looking? Oh, I don't know. Starting the season in the top 5, favored in every game they play outside of maybe that Clemson week. They're trotting a Heisman Trophy candidate out there week after week. They're the favorites along with Clemson to be in the ACC championship game. They're boasting a coordinator who's one of the most respected and highly sought after in the game in Alex Atkins. They're boasting another coordinator who, though FSU fans have had problems with Fuller at times, has made FSU's defense better year after year after year, and they were a top 20 unit in the country in 2022. Miami's biggest rivals have a coach who doesn't just preach culture, accountability, service, and work. He lives it. Compare the 2 programs and where they are right now. Miami is a program that's in a lot of trouble. But when you look at both programs, Florida State is so far ahead. They're an established system that's been in place for 4 years. Meanwhile, Miami is a brand new system yet again in year 2. Florida State has a Heisman candidate at quarterback, the most important position on the field. And Miami's going to trot a guy out there that got benched twice last year against both Middle Tennessee State and Duke. Florida State has a culture that is team first, and Miami may build toward that, but right now Miami's culture is still me first. You see that through what Miami is going through now. When we look at it, Miami's a program that's in trouble, and I don't know if John Ruiz's money is going to be enough to save them. Miami will certainly make a couple of hires here in the next few weeks. And again, their fans will celebrate that like the offseason champions that they are. But starting over is never a good thing, especially after year 1 of your tenure. The 2 programs are putting more and more distance between each other, and that's great news for FSU fans. Now that we've told you how much better of a position Florida State is in than Miami, here's a breakdown of the gap that exists between Florida and Florida State. Click that if you want to learn more.